And it is really an honor to speak here this morning because this place, this outdoor chapel, has always felt sacred. Right here is where my brother got married. It's where my family held a memorial service for my grandfather. And it's where when I was a teenager, I would always love to come and just sit and think. And I've heard many guest speakers at Thacher over the years, and often they tend to start by telling the story of the first time they came to the Thacher campus. And so at the risk of sounding cliche, I would like to share with you my memory of the first time I ever visited Thacher, because it is one of my earliest and most vivid memories. And it has nothing to do with horses or avocados or orange blossoms. This happened in February of 1973, and I was about to turn 4 years old. So my dad, who's CdeP 51, he moved our family out from New York to Ojai because he took a job here in the development and alumni office. And he got us a house down near the corner of Grand and McAndrew, down by the dip. And so I remember one day, February, my parents drove onto campus. They had this enormous Ford LTD station wagon. And they parked right in front of upper school because my brother, who's class of 76, was a sophomore living there. So I remember jumping out of the car, sort of like when I take my dog to the dog park and he leaps out of the car, and I see the vast expanse of the upper school lawn. I don't know why, but I decided to see if I could somersault down the entire thing. So I crouched down, got on my hands and heads, and I started tumbling over and over and over, gaining momentum, and I made it all the way down to the headmaster's house down near the bottom. And I just remember the green grass and the blue sky and feeling incredibly dizzy. So I like to tell people that I literally fell head over heels in love with Thacher. And I'm just very grateful my life keeps circling back to this place. So this morning, I would like to use this opportunity to talk to all of you as a parent to parent, an alumna to student, about learning from and bouncing back from mistakes rather than being defined or haunted by them. But first, let me explain a little bit about what I'm doing these days, because it's not at all what I started out intending to do. Originally, I wanted to become a writer, like my grandfather, David S. Lavender, who he taught English here for over 3 decades, and he authored numerous books about the West, histories and novels. So I went to graduate school in journalism, and I started a career as a newspaper reporter. But somehow along the way, I developed this hobby, and it turned into a second career. And that is as a competitive long-distance runner. And now I work as a running coach, which is really kind of funny because I distinctly recall as a student that just 2 laps around the track down there felt like a form of punishment, and I hated it. But since then, I have run over 60 marathons and ultra marathons. I've always finished and sometimes even won. But something happened this past March that I am not particularly proud of. This past March, for the first time ever, I got a DNF, which stands for did not finish. And this happened, it was a 62-mile race along the Pacific Crest Trail up in the Columbia River Gorge. And I just felt lousy from the start. We were going along this pretty rugged stretch of trail, and a big gap opened between me and the pack of top 10 women, and I was slipping and tripping on these rocks. And I did not have a good excuse, like a true injury. I just felt profoundly ambivalent and burned out. So for the first time ever, I called it quits, and I dropped at the halfway point. And I honestly felt pretty shaken up and depressed about it afterward, about being a quitter, and I felt nervous to try racing again. But eventually I began to make peace with the experience and ultimately to perform better at races over the summer, because I analyzed all the things I had done wrong in my training, all the mental factors that set me up to fail. And it turns out that DNF was one of the most valuable learning experiences that I've ever had as an athlete or as a coach. So now let's go back 30 years to my senior year at Thacher, because having a senior and a freshman here now sparks a lot of flashbacks to those years and to all the things I learned then And there's so many moments when I recall just being transfixed by learning in the classroom. Whether it's when we peeled back the tissue of the fetal pig in biology, or all the times I eagerly raised my hand to participate in English and talk about those metaphors in Gatsby or Kafka's Metamorphosis. But I also find myself ruminating about all the times I messed up, the times I got JC'd. And yes, it happened more than once. And how those mistakes affected me. My first 3 years, I earned a reputation as a really strong student and a top rider, and I got High Point Award freshman gymkhana, Go Blue Team. I loved life in the dorms, and I was eager to please my teachers. And the same could be said, more or less, about my boyfriend, Morgan Smith, who was 1 year ahead of me in class of 85. And for those of you who don't know Morgan, he's sitting here this morning because he and I ended up getting married. His life is funny. Morgan started his senior year really happy and proud to have been chosen a prefect. So one ordinary afternoon in the fall of '84, Morgan was a senior, I was a junior. We were sitting outside a study hall. We were talking about how we had so much homework. We just did not want to go to formal dinner. Sound familiar? So we came up with a bright idea to skip dinner and go back to our rooms because we just wanted to get started on our homework and we didn't want to deal with getting dressed up for formal. So it was easy. All we had to do was sign out and say we were down at my parents' house. So that's what we did. But the faculty somehow figured out that we did not go to dinner at my parents' house, and we had lied on the sign-out sheet. So we took a trip to the Judicial Council. I got work crew and a stern warning. It wasn't the end of the world. But Morgan got hit hard. Morgan was stripped of his prefecture. He felt like he had a cloud over his senior year, and it was a really hard thing for him and his parents to go through. But he got through it, and his senior year was not defined by it. And in fact, many of our classmates and former teachers don't even remember this incident. So we can look back and just chalk it up to something stupid we did and learned from. And most importantly, I learned the lesson that you do not tell a lie. The honor code doesn't have any gray areas. So 1 year later, Morgan went to college and I started my senior year. My senior year had a lot in common with that race I ran last March when I DNF'd, and that it started badly and kept getting worse. Here are some of the highlights I remember. I was not elected a prefect. Mr. Robinson gave me my first C in English. Thank you. I stayed in bed and slept through my AP French class so many times that my teacher, Mr. Bird, finally one day left the classroom, marched over to my dorm room, woke me up and said, "What is the matter with you?" And then when it was time for the AP English exam, I think I had some kind of anxiety attack mixed with an existential crisis. I left the exam room midway through and I had not answered a single question. But it gets worse. Toward the end of April, I did something stupid and escapist and illegal. So not surprisingly, I got busted and I took another trip to the Judicial Council. Keep in mind, this was gymkhana season. The one thing I really cared about my senior year and worked really hard for was my horse and riding. And I really wanted to win the High Point Award at gymkhana that year. Instead, I missed the big gymkhana entirely because I got suspended. I had to go home for a couple of weeks. It was just an awful thing to go through. But thankfully, I came back and I graduated. So what ultimately saved me senior year? How did I get through it and end up okay? I'd like to give my parents some credit, but honestly, they were kind of missing in action at that point. Instead, there were three things that helped me, three things that are at the heart of the Thacher experience and for which I will always be grateful. Number one, my teachers. They really did care and they really did influence their students, as they did in my grandfather's day and as they continue to today. As the historian Henry Adams said, A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. I actually heard that quote for the first time at my grandfather's memorial service when Mr. Mulligan used it in his remarks. An alumni who had my grandfather as a teacher liked to tell me stories about how he used to write in the margins of their papers in big red letters, BS, which stood for be specific. And how he'd say, there's no such thing as good writing, there's only good rewriting. So he pushed them and he inspired them. When I was a student here, my English teachers, Bonnie and Peter Robinson, did the same thing. They nurtured a genuine desire to participate in class and to read the books and poems that they assigned. So when Mrs. Robinson took me aside and she said she was worried about my behavior and my feelings, actually her exact words were, "You seem to be on a path of self-destruction." I started to open up to her. So now as a parent, I appreciate again the tough love and dedication that every faculty member here brings to his or her calling, both inside the classroom and out. We should all say a prayer of thanks for the great teachers here who are also great coaches and mentors. Number 2, the horse program helped me. Having to get up and feed my horse every morning gave a structure and a purpose to my day when I was on the verge of blowing everything else off. Being able to gallop up that trotting hill or jump one of those picnic tables out by the Diamond Hitch barbecue gave me kind of release and thrill that I really needed. And number 3, the honor code. When I got caught and confronted during the spring semester of senior year, I told the truth. I knew that telling a lie would only make things worse. And I wanted to confess. I wanted to come clean. Unfortunately, 2 of my good friends were confronted about the same infraction, and they chose to make up stories and to deny what we had done. And so they got expelled, and they never got their Thacher diplomas. For a long time, I came back to campus full of shame and regret about my senior year. I just so very much wanted a do-over, a second chance. But at a certain point, I came to terms with it. I learned from it, and I forgave myself. I found my footing in college, hit my stride, and everything really did work out okay. So to all of you students who are listening, I sincerely hope you do not make these kinds of mistakes. I hope you do your best and make the most of your time at Thacher. Try always to follow through on your word and see things through to completion. Have the courage to embark on new challenges and try not to DNF. But when you screw up something or fail at something, either now or later in life, it's probably a matter of when, not if, then own up to your mistake. Learn and grow from it and make peace with it. Understand that your shortcomings and your mistakes may outnumber your times of success, and that's normal. In fact, it's a good thing because your response to those shortcomings is what builds character and might ultimately be what leads to your success. And parents, I urge you to love your kids unconditionally, especially when they mess up and fail. Support them and understand that they probably feel pretty terribly about themselves, even if they act like it's no big deal or they don't care, because they do. Don't try to fix their mistakes for them, but do express your love and your confidence that they will figure things out and everything will be okay. I appreciate this school for so many reasons. And a big reason is that this hallowed place teaches and disciplines its students in ways that make them smarter and stronger in the long run. Thank you.